We now present a conversation with Professor Bhopendra Jasani from King's College, London. In conversation with him is Professor G. Venkatraman.
Sairam, Professor Jasani. Your full name is Bhopendra Jasani and you are in King's College, London. Right?
That's right, yes.
From which year?
From 1990, I joined King's College.
So you've been there for about 12 years
12
now.
years
12 years now.
Yeah.
Now, you are a PhD in physics?
In nuclear physics and nuclear medicine.
Nuclear physics and nuclear medicine. But you are now in the Department of War Studies in Christian College. Medicine comes to the aid of people hurt in war, injured in war. And nuclear physics, of course, I won't talk about it. How? Maybe you should tell us how you, a little bit about your background before we go to other things.
Well, my background is that I studied nuclear physics and nuclear medicine and did my PhD at University of London, University College Hospital.
Oh, University College.
Until 1971. I got my PhD in 71, and in 72, I decided that I was more interested in international affairs rather than physics.
Okay, you went to London from India, is that it?
No, I was born in East Africa.
Which, Kenya?
Kenya, Nairobi. But then my parents went during the independence time between 47 and 49 back to India. And from there, we came to UK in 49. So I have really grown up and went to school and universities in London.
But you don't have a British accent, if I may say so.
Well, because I'm an Indian, you see.
That's not true. A lot of Indians go to America and in 3 days they pick up the American accent. Anyway, continue, please.
I have retained some of my Indianness. However, so in 71, when I decided that after my PhD, I was wanted to branch off, and I started to do a master's degree in international relations. And then a job was offered to me to go to Sweden at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, which, as you know, was funded at that time by the Swedish Parliament to look at the disarmament issues. And I was offered a job to look at the nuclear weapons proliferation. And that sounded an attractive idea rather than do more studies.
This was which year? 1972
I joined. Early in February 72 I left London to go to
the
Stockholm.
NPT was just trying to take shape at that time, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And in fact, that was my first of my task.
NPT, I should mention, is Non-Proliferation Treaty
of Nuclear Weapons. And the first review conference was going to be held in 1975. And I was asked in 74 to organize a conference on that with suggestions as to how we can, how the treaty has worked within those 5 years and what can be done further. So that was I really dived straight into the international politics.
And from Stockholm you came to London in 91? Or
no, 90? In 87 I came back to London after 16 years. But I didn't stick to only nuclear weapons issues over those 16 years because I was in a sense forced to move on from having an Indian background. Doing non-proliferation somehow didn't suit people. So I was moved on to a lot of other things like conventional weapons and that was rather soul-destroying. So I drifted without anyone knowing towards space. I began to look at the military applications of space rather than civil application. The reason was simple because in 1972, the strategic arms limitation talks were being signed early 72. And an American who was passing through our institute said to the director that, look, this treaty became possible because of the US and the Russian reconnaissance satellites, because they can verify that each side is obeying the treaty. So why don't you ask somebody to look at the capabilities of these satellites? And that was rather difficult because these are highly classified and still remain highly classified area. But nonetheless, I started from the first principle and said, well, if I were to build an optics of this kind, what could I see?
Okay, so from
that really I got hooked onto outer space issues.
Now, for purposes of, shall I say, earning a livelihood, you're studying war and things like that. But you have come here to Prashanthi Nilayam, which is the abode of peace.
That's right.
So my question is, from war, how did you come to peace?
Well,
in other words, how did you come to Swami?
Yeah, how did I come from war to peace is an easier question to answer.
Okay,
because
I'll make it difficult for you.
I was, as I said, I was working at Peace Research Institute in Stockholm, which focused on disarmament issue, and that's essentially a condition to create peace was the idea.
Yes,
so hence that's now coming to Swami, like I think perhaps most Indian husbands come to Swami via their wives. I was a chauffeur for my wife for a number of years to take her to various Sai bhajans and Sai programs.
In Stockholm?
In Stockholm, and then in London as well.
You had Sai centers in Stockholm?
That's right. In Stockholm, they had a very nice Sai center. About 15, 20 people. Very much devotee to Sai Baba. And in fact, my wife and my son, who was very young at that time, they both came with the group, Swedish group, to Prashanthi in the mid-70s. So it was very early that we were actually introduced to Sai Baba, and it's just that it took me rather a long time to latch on to him.
How did you latch on finally?
Finally was... because my wife was so devoted, and that I began to ask myself that maybe there must be something here that has kept her going for such a long time. And then I began to also listen to the talks given at the science centers, both in Sweden and in UK, and then began to read some of the science literatures. And essentially what I was reading, I was liking, because...
when did you come here first?
To Prashanthi, I came, it must be in the late 80s or early 90s. In fact, I came with a small group in a really concerted way in 94 and stayed at the ashram for 21 days. 94. But prior to that, a lot of the number of years brought me to India on my way to Japan and elsewhere. And I developed a very strong link with ISRO in Bangalore. And during those visits, I used to come here for a day or sometimes 2 days. And of course, ISRO realized that I was becoming a science freak, so they used to give me a car to come here.
Oh, that's very nice.
That was very nice of them, which brought me even closer and strongly towards Sai Baba. And then the rest is really history. It was essentially what attracted me most was that he is perhaps, if we regard him as a spiritual leader, then amongst all the contemporary spiritual leaders, he's the only one who, to my knowledge, says that I'm not here to convert you, but I'm only here to show you a way, whether that is within Hindu framework or Muslim framework or Chinese or whatever. And that I thought was an extremely interesting and a strong attraction. And also, of course, I regarded him also as another person, in a sense, a guru, because he was beginning to show me back that I ought to read my Gita again. Because many of the things that he was teaching and quoting sounded very familiar. And so I started to read my Gita again. So these were really the two, essentially, I guess, were the things that brought me very close in the sense that coming to Prashanthi and trying to reach him.
So a sort of awareness grew over you.
Absolutely.
Now you mentioned that you found him, or rather his teachings, very relevant to an individual and how he could sustain his faith and still be spiritual along the lines that Swami advocates and so on and so forth. But I want to ask you a question that relates to your professional work, namely studies on war. Have you ever looked at the teachings of Swami in the context of wars?
Not in any depth that I can say. But I, again, come back to Gita, in fact, and a question that has been in my mind regarding wars, for example, is the chapter 2 verse, I think it's 37, where Krishna is trying to persuade Arjun to fight, and he gives several reasons for doing that. Now, I ask myself, well, does that going to answer? How is it going to guide us in the present day? Because if I were to fight, and undoubtedly nuclear weapons and chemical weapons are going to come into play. Under those circumstances, I believe that there will be hardly much left in the world to rule or live in.
There is a point here. I think we should understand one thing. Let me tell you some difficulty I had for a long time with the Gita, that is. I thought Arjuna was right. And it appealed to me because it smacked of, shall I say, non-violence and ahimsa. But I did not realize that Gandhi, who was the greatest proponent of ahimsa amongst humans, at least in the 20th century, swore by the Gita. So it looked like a big contradiction. How come a man like this swears by the Gita? Then I got the answer after listening to Swami's discourses. I think people read Krishna's message very superficially. What Krishna is telling Arjuna is, as I understand it, and I don't believe I'm wrong because I have heard Swami discuss this many, many times. He says, you are in a certain station in life. You have a duty to perform. And you are running away from that duty. Nobody should run away from his duty. That is the general message. As regards Arjuna, the point is, when it comes to a showdown between dharma and adharma, man has a duty to fight for dharma, if needed, with weapons. And I believe somewhere or the other, Gandhi has also given a conditional approval to war.
Absolutely.
Subject to it meeting certain criteria.
Yes.
So I'm glad you agree with that. But now let us come to the basic issue of war in this day and age with all the terrible weapons. And I ask this question very, very carefully. Even if it is for dharma, should the problem be settled only through war?
No.
Obviously not.
Obviously, this is what I was in fact driving at in my initial remarks when we started this discussion. Because in this day and age, the weapons are so devastating. They are really, truly weapons of mass destruction. And if there were to be any kind of war, I think, particularly now that we are entering a phase in the Middle East, and my fear is that might well trigger a nuclear war. And that would, in my view, would be such a wrong thing, even for dharma, would be, because there will be nothing left at the end of the war.
In which case, why don't people seriously consider giving up all these weapons of mass destruction? We know that weapons are dangerous. Even some governments in the West are saying that there should be a ban on proliferation and all that. That means it is acknowledged that the weapons are dangerous. So obviously, the best way of getting rid of this danger is to get rid of these weapons altogether. What I want to know is, what is it in man's psyche that prevents him from adopting the obvious solution? Because we know that there is no other way to peace. The reason I am asking this question is very specific. If you look at the history of the avatars, the earlier avatars did, according to the folklore, use weapons to get rid of the bad guys. But Swami has no weapon of destruction. He has got an antidote to hatred, and that is the only thing that will work on a large scale. Now, we have seen this in action at the individual level. I am asking, why is this recipe not being considered at all on a larger scale, be it between communities or be it between even nations? Why are we dismissing this? Particularly because Western nations are by and large Christians, and this is the same message that Christ taught. What's going wrong where? That's what I'm trying to find out. Because if we know what's going wrong, we can try to fix that problem.
Well, maybe we will never have a complete answer to that, but we can have some incremental.
That's true. I feel that this is an issue that should be looked at. People
sure
are only
right.
looking at the other side of the issue.
I'm sure you're right. But when you suggest that why it's a Christian country and why are we still, whereas Jesus preached peace rather than conflict, why are we still...
No, I'm just saying a large part of the world is Christian.
That's right.
But they don't subscribe to what he taught.
Yeah.
And what he died for, incidentally.
I think my feeling is that it comes down to the essential, the human nature of greed, which really, in my view, is a problem.
The problem, in fact.
Well,
Almost.
Almost. It's because that plus, I mean, when I say A, because I wanted to add to the second one is the desire to dominate others. And this, I think this is where part of the problem lies, that this is the reason why we don't wish to give up weapons of mass destruction once you've acquired them. Because that gives you that power to fulfill your dominant nature and also the greed.
Now there is a question that I want to ask here. It is all right for those in power, in the governments, in the bureaucracy and the military, so on, to have such opinions. But the societies in the advanced countries or democracies, there is supposed to be free speech and so on. And the people are also educated. Is there no way to mold public opinion so as to swing governments? After all, the governments can't go against public opinion beyond a point, at least in democracies. So the question is there something fundamental that prevents such a thing from happening for people to reject war, devastating wars in particular? Governments may not give it up. I agree with that. No, they have vested interests. But what about people? People have their vested interests too. They have their life. They have their...
No, I think it's a little bit more than just vested interest as far as people are concerned.
What's that?
I think my feeling is one of the things that they don't really know what really issues are. In other words, you see, if people really genuinely knew what a nuclear weapon can do, and I think that we need to teach at a lower level, at the school level.
No, but even leave aside the nuclear weapon, Western society, and for that matter, a lot of societies elsewhere, are being tormented by crime, violence of various kinds, terrorism, you name it. And the solution that Swami gives is common to all forms of disruption, social disruption like this, of which war is one extreme. So, what I'm trying to say is, can we not in some way or the other sensitize people on a large scale to the teachings of Swami? Nobody is asking them to become devotees or come here, but to understand that the message of Swami contains the only hope and solution for the problems of mankind, whether it's related to drugs or whether it's related to crime or wars that will produce widespread devastation. What do you think about that?
I think you're right, and I think this is what some of us are outside India are trying to do in UK on a very small scale. It's not really, we still haven't quite grasped as to how to go about doing things. We are trying to feel our way. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is
how do you find the response? Are people responding?
Not so well, because I think immediate reaction, we go to educators, for example. Unfortunate thing is that there have been a lot of problems that they've had where a spiritual organization...
No, forget about spiritual. I'm not talking of that. I find that in many countries, education has become so divorced from values. I'm not talking of spirituality. Yeah. Basic values like truth. I mean, you ask a corporate executive to be honest and truthful. Yeah. You ask him to swear and say that I am speaking the truth, the whole truth and stuff like that, how will that fellow speak the truth if he doesn't know what truth is in the first place? Does he have to know it only from a dictionary or from experience? How will he be honest if he does not know what is honesty and what is dishonesty and is able to apply discrimination? Where will you teach it? Is it not in the schools? How can you have an educational system that is bereft of values?
No, you're right. This is where we are trying to do the basic human values. We are trying to introduce into schools.
You are?
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about what's going on in the UK?
Well, in UK, we are trying to get the schools, and some of them have responded quite positively to the Sri Sathya Sai's education in human values. And we produced some pamphlets and booklets and so on. And some schools have responded positively and have welcomed that. Others have not quite responded. And educational authorities have not quite accepted yet.
The schools that have responded, how do you find the results?
Well, it's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning.
Just the beginning. In the last a year or so, it's being introduced into a wider audience. But always we need to move rather gingerly there, because what I was about to say earlier on was that people somehow begin automatically think about cult and all this kind of things. And you need to first be prepared to dispel that kind of ideas. That, look, this is purely simply educational thing.
Quite apart from the kind of things that we are trying to do, is there a public awareness in general about the need for values?
Yes, that is for sure. It's certainly beginning now to be talked about.
Oh,
even by the politicians, because of the kind of crime rates that are going up and the gun culture that is being developed, at least in UK. That people are talking about, both educationalists and religious organizations, that look, there must be a need, must be now a role for values put into people's heads, that look, there is something other than just picking up a gun and getting your desire fulfilled.
So that is the opportunity that should be seized.
Absolutely.
Would you like to?
I think so. But it's not an easy one. But certainly it's because people are talking about. Now, let me give you an example. We were trying to do, for example, now at a regional level in London, we are trying to organize a group of people from different faiths and ask them to come and address this question of how do we achieve through your faith peace. And we are going to hold this particular exercise in February next year. So this is one attempt we are making. Now, when we are asking about 7 faiths to come, and we will not talk about Baba's work in this context, so they will become aware of that. Now, the difficulty, of course, will come, and I already see that, is that people with different faiths, when you bring them in, they usually come from the interfaith background. They are already, in a sense, half converted to recognize other faiths. So that's one difficulty, that we really still can't get a true church leader to come and sit with us and talk about things. But that will come, I'm sure. It's a matter of time.
Do you feel that values are best propagated only through the channels of particular faiths?
It's a start.
It's a start.
It's a start. And as I mentioned earlier, through schools...
No, but then there may be problems. Schools may say, we have children of different faiths, so there will be a difficulty in trying to teach values through this faith or that faith. But on the other hand, a thing like truth is something that even atheists expect.
Sure.
Scientists may say, I don't believe in God, but he has to be truthful.
Yeah.
So that is something that has to be accepted by everybody. And there's a question of right and wrong that transcends all the demarcations of religions. Killing is bad, even in a communist society which denied God. So if you talk about values at that level, people will be able to have the feeling that, okay, you're not tampering with my faith, you're not disturbing my beliefs. Don't you think that approach would appeal even to people who are otherwise skeptical about religion?
I think it will, and it does appeal. In fact, this is perhaps the one basic reason why you do see a lot of Westerners attracted towards Baba's work.
The reason I'm saying this is, if you are to deal with these major questions of war and things like that, somehow one has to reach out to the policy planners. Somehow they have to have alternate methods of thinking, not just, look at the whole problem linearly and look upon war as the best solution or whatever. And these are people who have already drifted away from their faith, whatever it is, except notionally. They may have a Christian name or a Muslim name, but they may have nothing to do with religion. However, many of these people are decent enough to believe in values, which are probably lying dormant. If that can be activated and brought to bear on the way they think with regard to their particular profession, be it commerce or military affairs or even politics, then lots of things could improve. For example, in India, one of the issues is governance.
Yes.
I may be a very staunch follower of my faith, but if I'm put in a seat where I have to govern, I may do a terrible job.
Yes.
That's because I have dissociated this from that. This is where value is needed, not in my puja.
No, you're absolutely right.
So what I'm asking in short is, you live in Western society. How do you think Western society can be sensitized to this kind of thing?
I think there are a number of ways, and we are trying to do that. This is what one I mentioned.
No, you don't even have to look at what you're doing in the organization. Can you give a prescription?
Yeah, no. I don't think I have one, actually. We are all trying to fumble our way.
How are you
find
trying? Let's hear about that.
We said the faith business. That's one avenue that we are trying to open up. The second one, which is where I'm involved in any case, and that is through the United Nations work. And here, I am going to attempt, and we are going to try and get this rolling in April. We want to try and collect few people, both from the UN agencies and also from the local politicians rather. And make them aware of, you see, at the moment we can seize the opportunity on the UN side because the current Secretary General of United Nations, Kofi Annan, is a more spiritual character than we have ever had one for a long time in that agency. And if you look at his pronouncements in the recent years, I think they are coming towards looking at human values. Now, at least I have been trying to identify which way it's going. Are
you aware of the program that Victor Kanu is doing in Africa on water education?
Sure.
Human values and water education. That's under UN sponsorship.
That's right. Precisely. So that is already we've opened up a channel in Africa, but I think that is a lot easier to do than to do it in a developed country and in an industrialized country. And this is an attempt to make aware of people that there is such a thing as UN Avenue under which we can talk about these things.
Okay, that's also good because a large part of the world is underdeveloped, and if you can, inculcate or restore values, shall I say, in Africa and large parts of Asia and Latin America, we are doing pretty good. Yeah,
except that's true. In numbers, that is correct. But in terms of to put it crudely, clout, we don't have that, at least at the moment.
No, we don't have that. But I'm saying if these people's awareness is aroused and they become, transformed and they take to values, then it would not, at least in some parts of the world, certain kinds of conflicts and disturbances and things would have disappeared.
Yes.
That's a big plus.
That is a plus. Absolutely. And in that context, I think tackling Africa is a
Let me ask you one related question. We have been talking mainly about the views of the adults. Supposing you were to talk to children, say, 10 to 14 or even 9 to 14, something like that. Do they simply reflect the views of the adults, or do they have independent thinking on these matters? Do they have preferences? Do they feel they're likely to be attracted? Do you feel they're likely to be attracted to values? The reason is children tend to be more idealistic before they become hardened. Is there any scope for tickling that idealism in the Western countries at least?
It's a difficult one, particularly in the Western world.
What's the factor that's impeding? Media?
No, they become independent rather too quickly. You see, the teaching in schools, for example, is geared to making you independent thinker. Now, it's on the one hand, it's a very good thing to have, but it does shut the mind off to some of the ideas that we are talking about, because those are the more difficult ideas to implement than to say pick up a gun and throw a stone at some windows. So, whereas you're right, one should tackle this at the school level.
Is this not a case of rights or responsibilities?
Yes.
That's how he puts it.
It is. But you need to teach them.
Then it comes back to policy planners. The policy planners have to realize that in the interest of national security, they have to make sure that these children are taught about
we are seeing today, the terrorists are generally very young people, in their teens. And so that, in a sense, illustrates the point that we really have to tackle rather soon and at an early age.
What do you think are the factors that promote terrorism? It's war of a different kind.
It's a very different kind. But that has a more religious connotation than
no, that is only in the context of certain geographical situations. For example, the conflict in Lanka was called terrorist. It was not religious at all.
No, that's right.
So what I'm trying to find out is it connected with disenchantment and disillusionment and things like that, and a sense of being aggrieved and denial? Because you can't jump into mass violence of that kind all of a sudden. There must be triggers. And we don't seem to look at the triggers and then just simply point a finger at those who have gone astray and who are looking for a solution supposedly of the wrong
I think
type.
you're right, actually, that we are not looking at the causes of these things. And the causes are different in different places, as we've already mentioned.
But there may be some fundamental factors common to all of them.
And that could well be.
What I'm asking is,
yes.
Are people looking at these issues? Because if you simply say, where are the terrorists, let's wipe them out and things like that, you can't wipe an ideology. You can wipe out individuals.
Well, in UK, the Prime Minister had hinted on that.
Oh, he did.
Vis-a-vis the Middle East terrorism, where he says that, well, the root of the problem is, of course, the Palestinian. So let's tackle that problem. Or what he precisely said was, let's tackle in parallel both of these issues. So in a sense that in some places it is recognized that, yes, you need to go to the root of things rather than tinker around the edges.
When I say root, I don't mean merely the political.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I'm talking about the emotional, the psychological root.
Yes.
You see, terrorism is born in the mind.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that the mind is adapted properly.
Yeah. No, but at
For
least
example,
the concept of going to the roots is already...
One of the things related to the root is the following. There's no use talking about fighting terrorism if your whole country is going to be full of toys or guns, and then you have war games in the video parlors, and you have toys that promote violence. Psychologically, I'm tuned to violence, and somehow or the other, it'll seek to find outlet. Just don't jump into violence without a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
I mean, history proves this. Wouldn't you agree? You are in the Department of History.
Yes. And people have address to that also issue, like, can we limit the kind of films that are being shown on television, for example? But they under the name of freedom, what they've decided is that, well, we can't stop altogether, but what we can do is to limit the time during which these films are shown. so that young mind is not exposed. But somehow it always creeps in. Video games is a classic example.
So if I can look at the whole thing together, it looks like we are creating a lot of problems in the name of freedom, which Swami says is a clamor for rights. In the process, we abandon responsibilities.
Yes.
If we invert the priorities, we have to settle for the outcome. As is the seed, so is the fruit.
Yes, absolutely.
On the other hand, if you sow the seed of responsibility, then you will get decency, you will get tolerance, you will get peace. You can't sow this seed and get that fruit. That's what it looks like. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Because the way Swami puts it, you can't sow a neem seed and expect a mango fruit.
Absolutely right. The problem, of course, is at what level do you tackle these?
No, but are people willing to face up to this? It is fairly obvious.
They're beginning to now, because when it's hitting them, then even the general public is asking. Even at the grassroots levels, on an individual house complex, for example, individuals have got up and said, hey, enough is enough. I don't want my house vandalized by you guys. So they have actually forced the police to come and act and do things. At least we can't actually correct a violent person overnight, so you put them into some kind of...
But that is only scratching the surface.
Yes, it is.
Really.
But one has to start somewhere.
So really, society must together go to a different set of values collectively. Then only there is...
Well, I think not only collectively, I think it has to be tackled at different levels, and I think we've already hinted on that. Local school levels, local government level, then government level, and then United Nations level.
Of course, that's true. And also at the home level.
It starts with the home level.
And the media level, which is...
Media is the worst one. Media is the most difficult one. In the name of freedom, they can churn out all kinds of things. And there one needs to also show the media people the responsibility. For sure.
Well, it has been very interesting talking to you, and I hope what you're trying to do in the UK will succeed, because humanity today has no alternative to peace.
Absolutely.
The alternative is too frightening to think about. And I have come to the conclusion that the only solution for peace is what Swami advocates. If we accept it, well and good. If we don't, it's like burying our head in sand. And I hope people will not be that stupid anymore. We have been stupid long enough. As you said, enough is enough. We have to pull our head out of.
Only the next few days will tell us whether we have been stupid enough.
But I do hope you in the UK and other countries where Swami's message needs to be heard loudly and clearly would be able to do something. Swami's grace would be with you, Swami's blessings would be with you, and you would be able to achieve and give humanity the gift it needs so much, that of peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sai Ram, and all the best.
We next have a conversation with Mr. Nirmal Suri, a retired Air Chief Marshal, who is in conversation with Professor G. Venkatraman.
So, welcome to our studios of Radio Sai. I think you should begin by telling us a little bit about yourself, because most people won't know about your background, wonderful background, professional background that is. And then we'll come to the question of how you came to Swami, because that's also important before we start talking about other things which are also interesting and important. So why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I have no hesitation in saying that maybe because of the grace of Bhagavan, I was born in a reasonably affluent family, a family that was very conservative in some ways, and yet it gave us the opportunity to be able to be educated under modern systems. Now, this in itself is debatable, whether those modern systems in itself had the kind of values that
Where were
we
you?
should have.
Did you study in Doon School or?
No, I started with La Martiniers, then St. Xavier's.
In Delhi?
In Calcutta.
Calcutta. Oh, you're a Calcutta man, I see.
And from there, then I went to the Prince of Wales Military College. I lost my father at a very young age. And then I went to boarding at the Prince of Wales Military College.
In?
Dehradun.
Dehradun.
It's now called the RIMC, or the Rashtriya Indian Military College. And I joined the Navy as a cadet. And
oh my God, you're a Navy man. I didn't know that.
Navy as a cadet. And then it so happened, which I see in now retrospect, that when I became Chief of the Air Force, my term mates from the Army was General Rodericks, and from the Navy was Admiral Ramdas. Now, Ramdas and me were both naval cadets, and only one person could make chief at that time. So I think that was the grand plan for Bhagavan, that I had to shift to the Air Force. But coming back to this very seriously, I started with a kind of a peculiar kind of an understanding, because my grandmother, who had a lot of influence on me, an extremely conservative lady, she treated me like a Brahmin. And being a Kshatriya, I found it a little odd. I used to keep a little bodhi or this thing, and I used to wear that, and not being a Brahmin. And I would not allow people who ate meat, and particularly beef, to enter anywhere close to me. And I was that rigid. It's only in these public schools that I realized that there was more to it than just putting a stigma on a set of people, and you didn't have to indulge in those luxuries if you don't believe in it. Well, cutting a long story short, that phase also went up away, and I became a very ardent follower and a worshipper of Krishna. My whole knowledge on theology was only Krishna. And
this was when you were in school or later?
From my grandmother's time. Okay. I learned Gayatri then.
Okay.
So I used to say the Gayatri part, and I knew Krishna. And to me, it was synonymous, these two. That's how I started my childhood, and it carried on till I was a wing commander, when I lost an ivory murti of Krishna and Radha that I used to carry with me 24 hours a day. And I had my whole squadron. I was a squadron commander, and I had 400 personnel under me, and we searched and searched. It's now that I realize the Swami took that away. It was not lost anywhere, it was just taken away. And another murti was given to me then, which is still with me today.
Tell me, when you were in the Air Force with all these people who are very modern, quote unquote, did you not feel odd to worship Krishna?
No.
I don't think many people would have worshipped Krishna in the Air Force.
You'd be amazed. People who are in the Air Force and who risk their lives every day in flying, especially fighter flying, this was my forte. You become extremely religious.
I see. That's interesting.
Religious. As a matter of fact, you'll find that 90% of the Air Force people are religious, irrespective of what faith they belong to. And I remember as a pilot officer in 1952, I used to proudly tell people, I said, look at these army chaps, they're so smart, they want to finish everything that should have been done tomorrow, they want to finish it today. Look at this naval chap, he sort of looks so handsome in that uniform. And I said, as far as the Navy chap is concerned, he roughs the high seas. As far as the Army chap, he trudges Mother Earth. But I said, we poor Air Force chaps, we fly at 40 or 50,000 feet. But we are that much closer to God as compared to the other person. Of course, at that time, I didn't realize that God was within us. So this is the faith in which people, even today, whether they're playing tennis and winning a thing like that person from Croatia, the moment he won, he looked up and he said, God is up there in the blues. So whatever is the significance, the people in the Air Force have that. And I fought wars. The Chinese, of course, we didn't deliver any weapons. We were stopped from doing it, but we flew over enemy territory. Indo-Pak wars, I fought both the Indo-Pak wars. And I was a squadron commander in the 1971 war when we liberated Bangladesh. And I know that there were many instances in which I could have easily died. But there was some controlling force. I also wanted to mention that I was never a good student when I was in school. But after I joined the Air Force, I never really looked back. Somebody was doing my homework for me. Somebody was doing my flying for me. And when I sat for my A1 category, which is the highest category in the instructors thing, from Tambram in Madras, or Chennai rather.
I studied in the neighborhood college, Christian college.
Madras Christian College. That's where I sent my children. And I did this test, and the examiner told me that nobody till today has secured this kind of marks in that particular thing. You have to get over 90% to get your A1 category. It's now that I realize that all the maneuvers I was doing was pointing towards Puttaparthi.
Oh, yes.
You see, that time I didn't realize. Although I must mention to you, when I served in Iraq, I had one of the highest awards. Once again, Swami got me this award over there. And when I came back, for the first time, I had a dream, when I had a very strong personal problem. And in the dream, I saw a person whom I hadn't seen earlier giving me a kind of advice, which I woke up in the afternoon and I followed. And things worked hunky-dory.
Okay, that brings me to the question, when did you come to Swami and what exactly happened, if you can share it with us?
Yes. Well, as I said, that I always find this question a little difficult to answer, because now, especially after hearing Swami. But let me go back and say that in 1971, what was my vision of this whole thing? At that stage, I had this dream.
Oh, you had it in 1971?
I had just come back from Iraq just before the war, when this dream came. And then I fought the war, where Swami saved me in that war also. I could have been shot down on a number of occasions. And thereafter, I started getting people I used to meet. They would give me Swami's photographs or calendars of Swami's, etc. And it was 2 years later that Swami came to Delhi, 2 or 3 years later.
Yes.
And there, my 4 children, my wife and I, we wanted to go, but we didn't know the person in Golf Links. It was house.
He used to stay in Golf Links in those days.
We didn't know the person. An unexpected, distant relation we had never met showed up, and he says, "You want to come to see Sai Baba?" So gladly we jumped, and we went for 2 days. Swami blessed everyone. I got a chance as he walked past. I wanted to touch his feet, but my eyes dropped. I don't know why, and I couldn't see how Swami blessed me. But the children and my wife, I saw that he had blessed. Thereafter, I started seeing Swami. The odd time he would come in my dream. I went many years later. I used to come a few times over here. In Allahabad, when I was an Air Vice Marshal, I saw Shirdi Baba. Going to the Rotary Club to address them, I saw a person who I felt was Shirdi Baba. I stopped the car, flag car. I got down from my car. I went straight up to him. And in that culvert, I don't know if others saw or not, and I did my namaskar to him. And I said, "Baba, can I come and meet with you?" So he said, "Come tomorrow. That's my cottage over there. It's a Jhopri, you know, in Allahabad. This is in Allahabad."
How did you recognize him as Shirdi Baba? I
had been to Nasik, to Shirdi Baba many times. So that is the shape I had remembered.
Oh yes, Nasik is an Air Force place.
Yeah. We have got the Hindustan Aeronautics Center for yourself over there. And so I went the next...
Which year was this?
This was 1982.
82. So you saw Shirdi Baba live in flesh in Allahabad.
Sitting on the culvert.
Culvert.
Yes.
It's very interesting. I've heard a couple of other people say the same thing.
Then I did my pranam and I said, "Baba, can I come and meet you?" So he told me, as I mentioned. So I went the next day to that thing, and it was a dark kind of thing. He looked at me. He said, "There's too much shine on your head, but you will be chief." And he started rubbing my forehead like this. And then I touched his feet and I said, "Baba, can I come back and meet you tomorrow?" My idea was to go home and bring something for him. From Tambram, which from the center is quite far. He didn't respond to that, but he told me, you will be chief. And next day I came. There was no cottage or basha there. There was nothing over there. I asked some people, they said it wasn't there. Now I thought maybe, others will never believe this, but I was very happy.
But you are very convinced that it was Shirdi Baba.
Yes, I was convinced. I was convinced because I have... and that happened to me in Delhi also, in same Shirdi Baba. When he said, you give everyone money, you don't give me.
That's typical. That's typical.
So these words I cannot forget. And I went chasing for that Baba, because I used to give these lepers, or the people suffering from leprosy. Forgive my expression leper, I didn't mean that way. People suffering from leprosy. So that was the starting point. Then I came to Swami, and especially when I was vice chief, and I came to him, and then chief, and Swami was all the time curing me for some heart problem. He used to materialize vibhuti, put his hand on my heart and keep rubbing it.
You had a heart problem?
Yes, I had a bypass surgery later, which I will come to, which is also very interesting. So I became chief. I came to Swami.
Which year did you become chief?
I became in 91. And as you know, I was invited as a chief guest by Swami in 92 to the summer.
Yes.
The summer course on theology and Indian culture in Bangalore, at Whitefield.
But I've also seen you in the sports field on a sports day.
Yes, I was also there. So Swami called me, and frankly, at this particular thing, I asked the Vice Chancellor, I said, forgive my asking this question, I said, I don't have any credentials to be able to come here. How have I been called? So he said, frankly, I don't know how you've been called. Swami called me and he said, Suri ko bulao. So he says, that's how I got in there. And I didn't know what to say on this occasion. But somebody brought me a book and somebody gave me another magazine or something. And quickly I collated. Because at that time, I knew that Swami was well beyond a human being. But I didn't know the intensity like I know today that he is Bhagavan. I didn't know then. And but I realized that after I left from the summer course, after addressing them, and Swami then spoke, Swami mentioned to the boys that, Suri never went ahead of me. He would not allow me to follow him. He always followed me. He mentioned, because one of the students told me. And he says, when you boys were coming, he made room for you while I had crossed because of his respect for me. So that's how it started. I was very ignorant on these issues. I remember the sports field once when we were together.
Yes, I know.
And Swami called me and I didn't know where to put my chappal. And I put it in the wrong place. Suddenly it occurred to me, what the hell have I done? Okay. You see, I was very ignorant.
We all are.
Yes. But then he grew and grew and grew in me. And the time has now reached, having seen him multitude of times in my dream, I felt that two instances which are very significant here. When I retired, just before my retirement, I went to a temple, Krishna temple, in Hindon, which is near Delhi, which I had discovered when I was a squadron commander there. And I had it always painted white. And I just could not go wrong. And I had shivling also installed over there. And just before retirement, I prayed. I said, Bhagavan, never ever allow a slur on my name. And if you do that, Krishna, I will put 1,001 rupee. This is 93 August. 93 I forgot, 94 I forgot, 95 I forgot. 96 I get a dream. The Swami pulls me out of the bed, takes me to the small temple room that I have, and he says, put 1,001 rupee on my feet. And Swami is wearing slippers. So I woke up my wife. I said, I want money. I've had this dream. So obviously she wasn't as convinced as I was, but I wasn't taking a chance. And I put that. And I could not, for the love of God, figure out why would Swami want me to put 1,001 rupee at his feet. Then I had another dream. And Swami said, this time I was in Puttaparthi, Suri, tum paisa promise karta hai, deta nahi. And that is the time I realized that something that had happened, I had forgotten. Similarly, I must tell you, when I had this bypass surgery, multiple bypass, since I had retired from this senior position, people were rather sympathetic and they didn't want to take a chance. So I was shipped into escorts. And there they did my angiogram and the rest, and they said, bypass mandatory, 3 arteries are 100% blocked. And there's no question of waiting. So I said, I will not...
Which year was that?
This must have been 97. I said, I am not having this bypass until I have gone to Swami and got his blessings. And my family was very upset with this. Suddenly I found all the nurses coming, they brought a picture of Sai Baba. All the doctors coming, they had a picture of Sai Baba with them. And they were only talking to me about Sai Baba. It's some transformation which I didn't. Next morning I was shipped in for my operation. I saw Swami standing there. They gave the injection, I was out. When I woke up, I saw Swami. And I remained so. But it is not this alone about Swami. Swami has come into my house in my dream once again. And I have a big statue of Krishna. He merged into that. And he stood in front of it, merged into it. So I thought Swami was indicating, put my big photograph there. So I put it at the base where Krishna was. It's only then that I realized that I had another dream where at night I feel Swami is somewhere and I'm looking up at the stars and suddenly I see Krishna in his full form with his flute. And I say, that is Krishna, that is not Swami. Then I see Shiv in a human form in my dream. And I say, that's Shiv Bhagavan, but where is Swami? Suddenly I see Narayana with that thing. And I say, I know that's Narayana, but where is Swami? And I wake up. And that's when I realized that all these doubts that I had as to who is Swami is the one and only form that exists. And that is, all forms are His. And all shapes are His. So this is basically what has made me today, is my conviction that Swami is God. That conviction is so deep and my love for him is so intense that is difficult to put into life.
Oh yes, understandable. See, now that you have love for him, how do you intend to share this love with others?
You know,
in other words, the question is, we all are supposed to serve Swami. How do you see yourself serving Swami?
Yes. You see,
I hope you don't mind that question.
No, I really appreciate that question. When my father died out of cancer in 1944, he had a very painful death. Cancer of the intestine.
Yes, that can be very nasty and painful.
And in Lahore, there was a doctor by the name of Maharajkar who used to do a keyhole appendicitis operation. He thought it was appendicitis. They found this. And my father died. I wanted to become a doctor. But destiny brought me into the Air Force. Today, my service to Bhagavan will be in the form that the cancer that I could not cure then is the cancer of lack of righteousness in this world. The cancer where the morality of the individual is going down. These are the cancers that I must help destroy if I really believe in Swami, which I do. And that is what my attempt is going to be. Of course, nothing is possible unless Swami blesses it himself. And I know that his blessings will be there. But my orientation is clear. I will not hurt a person now. Whatever money I have, I share with others, whatever limited money. And above all, I think coming into Swami's fold, I myself personally feel that I'm a better man because service to humanity is for which Swami is training us.
Where do you think your service is most required, or where would you like to be most active?
I think in the educational field. I'll tell you, I was a very dull student. Then when I retired from the Air Force...
I don't agree with that. As V.K. Narasimhan used to say, you are dull when you are not interested. The moment you become interested, you are no longer dull.
Possibly. So then when I went into the Air Force, I found that there were many self-styled intellectuals. So it became a competition, and I got great happiness when I left them trailing behind. But after retirement at the age of 62, I did my PhD in Contemporary Global Ecopolitics and Value Systems from Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And the whole thesis I changed into what Swami really wants us. And that is, I said, there is the human element, there is the animal element, and there is the vegetation element or the environmental element. These three have to remain in harmony. And the human being, who is the only person who has the capacity to think, if he knows his moral obligation towards the animal kingdom and the vegetable kingdom, then in time he will get to know his moral obligation to his fellow human being. That is what Swami says. Your education is to serve your society. Your deed, you're born for this purpose. You can't go back to God unless you will. And I really, to be very frank, Dr. Venkataraman, I want to say very clearly, I believe strongly that when we are born, everyone is so joyous and laughing.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to die when I'm laughing and others are crying. and that can only happen provided I follow the dictums that Swami has told us. Those dictums are not laws which are restrictive. They are for the purpose for which you are born.
You're talking about this education. I believe you are now talking to students in schools. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've been speaking basically to the teachers.
Teachers, is it?
Yes, teachers, because schools have different gradings, and I've had 2 talks now with the teachers, and I've been invited to some other schools at the present moment. And
these are schools in Delhi?
Schools in Delhi, and they are the top run of the schools.
How many teachers? All of them or just some of them?
The first one was 22 teachers were there. The second one, there was 24 or 25, some figure like that. The main thesis that is over here is that you have a role model as to what education is. Because, we have to recognize today a few things. The first and foremost is that you are in a kind of environment where technology is moving at a galloping pace and obsolescence is setting in with equal rapidity. Now, you are a scientist, you know much more than I do. With the result, you require result orientation from students to be able to be a success, which really means, in simple parlance, PhDs and degrees that you can get. Also, the present environment is such, this materialistic environment, that there is no way by which your family lineage or your affluence can influence your success in any walk of life. So consequently, the parents desire that you give the children enough acumen to be able to survive in this materialistic world. To most parents, it is a very lovely world. But to us, we realize that it is a very handicapped world because we are looking at education in a very restricted sense. So what I'm really telling the teachers basically is that if you're talking in terms of learning without values is just literacy. I mean, a man in the street can also sign his name. It's just as good as that. You can have many PhDs. But learning with values is tantamount to education.
But do they accept that?
So far in these 2, maybe they took my age into account, they were a little complimentary on this whole issue. But the thesis they have bought, because eventually I explained to them that there are 2 types in which you can compartmentalize in very broad terms knowledge. One, as Bhagavan tells us, is collecting facts and information, you see, and disseminating it to the students, which really means information is two types. One is deductive and the other is empirical. And when you have a lot of this, then you've got knowledge. But until you're able to sift that knowledge, you cannot get wisdom. So that is the touching point here. So the second aspect is what Swami is telling us, something that you cannot see with your eyes, something that you cannot feel, but you can experience when you bring in this latent potentiality of Satya, Dharma, Prema, Shanti, Ahimsa. When you bring that out, this. And
you see, the question is the following. I accept all that you say, but let me play, as they say, the devil's advocate. Because I have seen a lot of young people who don't understand all these things. They say, look, it's stupid to talk of Satya. Any fellow who follows Satya is going to flunk, he's going to fail, he's going to be miserable, his life is going to be miserable, he's not going to be a success. That's the image that has been created in the minds of these people. We know it's false. How do you break that barrier?
the thing is...
you understand my point?
I have understood your point. What this question has been asked from me by a teacher also, similarly on this issue, but in a little broader sense. And I said, the light of one single candle cannot be consumed by all the darkness in the world. What we are aiming for in human values is this light. It is not measured against your success in one field. It has a long-term perspective. That light is there to groom a society, to groom the environment within which you exist. And we want many, many candles to
No, I agree with that. But the question is the following. The student says, and even the teacher says, hey, look, there's no point in being honest. You're doomed. Your life is going to be miserable. You have to be dishonest in order to succeed. That's the dogma that is being sold to the students, that is being sold to the parents, that is being sold to the public, and the teachers have swallowed it hook, line and sinker. So how do you fight this? That's my question. See, I tell you, I asked a little girl, young girl, a relative of mine, 17 years old, said, what's the national motto? She said, I don't know. You don't know the national motto? No, I don't know. Have you heard of Satyameva Jayate? No. So how do you expect this person to follow Satya if the student has never heard Satya?
You see, it's a question of transformation.
I agree with you.
Like Swami says,
yes,
that is not higher technology which will give you better tomorrow, but what will be the transformation of the human heart.
So now, how do you convince the young people that this is needed? That's my question.
The main thing is we have to be open to them, that some of you are going to be the losers in this whole thing. That your aspirations cannot be for materialistic goods. Your aspirations have to be on a long-term perspective. Like people like you who are sitting here who could earn so much there. Why are people like Dr. Venkatraman sitting over here? The reason is because you feel a moral obligation. Because there are certain values that have resurrected.
Let me put it like this so that you can answer me in a slightly different way. When we were young, at least it was the case with me and my friends, we were drawn by idealism. There was a cause for idealism there. In those days, we were not yet free, and there was Mahatma Gandhi and things like that. Are young people today, in your perception, having an inner craving, unstated perhaps, for idealism?
No, because your politicians today...
No, that's outside. But deep inside, do they have that spark?
I think that spark can be, if we address ourselves like we are doing over here, at the very, very young age, I think that spark can be kindled. It is something, it's inherent in us. Somebody
that's what I want. It is inherent in us.
It's somebody who's going to bring this out.
So
it's the latent potentiality.
That's the point.
Doctor, I just wanted to mention one thing over here. Let us talk dispassionately. Let's talk of this expression supervision. After all, your schools, they are being supervised. What is a teacher? Is a supervisor. Now, there are two types of supervision. One is numerical supervision, which is understood in our public sector. That is, one chap is to be supervised, you put 5 on his shoulders. The other is, one chap has 5 or 10, depending on his capacity. His job is not to sit and look at what he's doing, but to bring out his latent potentialities in the foreground. And those potentialities which are already manifested, to strengthen them with logic and understanding. That is why I think when Swami says this mnemonics, education, E-D-U-C-A-T-I, this spells it out. This is the job. And if we do this, as I said, that it will take some time, but it will bring a cleaner and a better society. And once this picks up, more and more people will be in it. And talking about this, let me tell you, I've seen this younger generation of Indians who are in London, for instance. So let me make it more, say in England in itself, not only London. I have interacted with them a lot. Mm-hmm. I think their conservatism and their moral standards are much higher than the Indians that we have here in Delhi.
What is the reason for that?
I don't know. They seem to understand. They're so conservative and they're so moralistic. Like Swami says, the moral quotient is very high. It's very high. And it's a very nice feeling. And those people, without being parochial, they know what is right and what is wrong. After all, just tell me, doesn't the Quran or the Bible or Buddhism or everything say Satya, Dharma, Prema, Shanti, Ahimsa?
That's true.
They all say it. They may use different words for it, but eventually it's the same. Those people in UK have basically, I must say, what Swami has told us is registered. And that is that your life is like an uncontrolled flow or a mass of water. Until you channelize that, it will always bring death, devastation, and destruction in its wake. I'm putting it in different words.
I understand.
So when you put these two channels or two walls, what have you done? You made into a river or a canal, whatever, to control the water, and it brings fertility in the soil. And what are these two banks? One is there's only one God. Whether you believe he's omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, that's your problem. The fact of the matter is there's only one God. And the second is that the distance between man and God is between you and yourself, meaning that the link between you and God is the link of religion. And religion is not designed to either distant man from God or man from man. So I think if we understand these tenets, like these people abroad understand these tenets, then it makes no difference to me whether you, after all, even on a Hindu concepts, we have caste systems, etc. But if we grow out of this, like the people, these children or the youth that I see, I feel so proud when they talk. They couldn't care a bit if that fellow is, from a different faith. But they know that if that company is not good company, don't abuse that company. Keep away from it. Isolate yourself from it.
So may I ask you if you have sort of general faith in the future in terms of what these young people believe?
I have a lot of faith.
Because a lot of people, are Cassandras of doom. They say, future is going to be terrible and all that. Do you have a different view about that?
I have a very different view. If people believe that tomorrow really augurs a doom, are the people who are creating the doom. You see, you cannot vacillate between hope and despair. You have to remain focused. Those people who vacillate between them enunciate the way you mentioned, Doctor. I think what we have to do is to understand we have a role model here. It doesn't make a difference whether we have 10 schools or 1 school or 3 schools. What we are interested in, how many candles, lit candles, are we producing? The enlightened, E for enlightenment and education. That is the concept. We have a role model here. I feel at least India, which has always been the focus of praying for others and trying to enlighten others, must take a lead role. We have a role model here. I'm telling these people in Delhi and in other schools, which I will be addressing people in Dehradun also soon with Bhagavan's blessings. And we must bring people here to see what is this whole game of educare or educare or whatever way you want to pronounce it. Let me just mention to you a very funny thing. You remember Swami mentioned to us about religion and he said relegare, and the other word is legaratio. Or So no, I wasn't very clear on the pronunciation, and I was speaking at a forum in UK. So I went to the church next door, and I met the priest. And I said, Father, I don't know how to pronounce this Latin word. Is it religare or religare, or what is? How do you pronounce it? And I was surprised when he told me. He said, why don't you come back tomorrow? I'll let you know. I felt like when I was flying for 42 years, somebody asked me, what is the control column? And I tell him, or the joystick. I tell him, come back tomorrow, I'll consult the manual. How can this man steer? How can he steer religion when he does not even understand? Religare in itself means back to the origin. So, you see, the dichotomies that exist is because of lack of education. And our perceptions will be strengthened if more and more people believe that there is more to this world than a world which is cunning, a world which has no moral values, and a world which is disastrous.
So, to put it all very simply, I just want to ask this last question. Do you believe that the young of this country are sort of oriented towards positive thinking, and there is hope for the future as far as this country is concerned, and therefore whole of humanity, in fact?
People like who are trained from the Sathya Sai institutions will mingle outside and create hope in a larger perspective.
Good, that's what Swami wants. So the candles will start from here.
The candles have to start from here, and nobody is going to be able to extinguish this candle that Bhagavan is.
That is true. That is true.
It's only time, and people like you and I must remain focused.
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. So please do spare us some more time when you come next time. I don't know when it's going to be, but we surely are not going to let you go without telling us about some of your experiences. You haven't discussed that this time, but maybe next time. Thank you very much. Sai Ram.
Thank you, sir. Sai Ram.
We next have a conversation with Mrs. Bernice Mead from the United States of America. In conversation with her is Professor G. Venkatraman.
Sai Ram, and welcome to our studios of Radio Sai. How many years have you been coming to Swami?
I found out about Swami in 1977 and made my first pilgrimage in 1978, so going on 26 years now.
Pretty good. And did you ever think that one day you would be interviewed on Swami's radio station?
Not in my wildest imagination.
By the way, have you ever been interviewed on television or radio? Must have been, I'm sure.
Yes, I have. Yes,
okay,
I have.
So getting interviewed is not a new experience, but getting interviewed for Swami's radio must be a new experience.
A wonderful experience.
Good. I'm glad you said
new
that,
experience.
because
yes.
many people are petrified. Okay, that's very nice. One thing that most of our listeners like to know invariably is, how did you come to Swami? So that's my standard opening gambit, shall I say. How did you come
that's
to Swami?
Wonderful.
We
that's
know when you came, but
really wonderful. Basically, you would think that someone like me is very atypical because I come from a farm family in mid-America, Oklahoma, from a large family, 11 children, and fundamental Christians. And stayed with that pretty much all my life until I met my husband, and he wasn't interested in organized religion. And so we began to search for truths in other areas, if we could come to some sort of agreement with each other.
How did you search for truth, and what was your feeling about truth?
Well, I went to, first of all, I was going, like I said, I was going to a very fundamental Church of Christ, it was called.
That's true.
And so I went to other more liberal type churches and still couldn't find what I was searching for there. And then we started meditation classes. And
you said that you were in search of truth. What did you mean by that?
At the time, I'm not sure.
In other words, I'm trying to get your perspective on truth. What did truth mean to you?
See, I had been taught all my life that Jesus was the only way. And not only was Jesus the only way, but the church that I attended was the only church. And so...
maybe they wanted you to feel that you were very lucky.
I think they did. They think they felt that they were lucky and that I was lucky also. But I questioned them from the time that I was a teenager. It seemed unreal to me that everybody that loved God could not have a chance to be with God, and so I wanted to know what was the truth? What was this all about? And could it possibly be that this little fundamental church that I was going to was really the truth, the only truth? Then I read about seer, a psychic, American psychic by the name of Edgar Cayce.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so at the time, we had just had our first child, and I was going through postpartum depression. And so I was really searching for something besides what I had. And I was watching this television program one morning, and they had Edgar Cayce's son on. And he told a little about his father and this book, There's a River, that was about his life. And so I went out that day and bought that book. Mm-hmm. And that's when I began to think about reincarnation, and it seemed to be the truth. It seemed to be, this had to be the way it was. And so I began in the metaphysics. Mm-hmm. And from there we went to meditation, and from meditation classes we went to a meeting that some nice fellow and his wife had just gotten back from seeing Sai Baba and telling me his experiences. And so
Who was this nice fellow, by the way?
Hal Stokes, an attorney from the LA area.
Oh, I see. I'm afraid I have not heard about him.
Very nice.
And that was
guy.
in 1977.
1977, right. February the 23rd. I call that my birthday.
What was it that he said that impressed you, if I may ask?
Well, basically, I went completely not thinking that I would be hear anything of any relevance, but my husband wanted to go because he said this being says he's a reincarnation of Krishna, and I felt like that couldn't possibly be, but I would go anyway. Mm. And so we were both captivated by his stories. He was basically just telling his experiences, that's all. Mm-hmm. And we were both just captivated. We spent the whole evening there. He had a movie and then just telling of his experiences.
By the way, is he still around?
Yes, he is.
Oh,
yes, he is. And he comes often, yes.
Oh, very good.
He has a center in his home in Mission Viejo. And,
okay.
Yes.
You tell him next time he comes here, he's going to be interviewed.
I will tell him that, and he will be most happy.
Very good.
Swami calls him a liar.
By the way, our currency is love. We pay in love, not in cash.
That's much better.
Oh, good. Okay, carry on. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Well, basically, my husband and I both had a wonderful experience that night. We smelled this wonderful jasmine flowery smell
right away. That's
right
very
away.
Nice.
And we thought that they surely had some incense or something burning, but we looked around and there was nothing there. And when we left that evening about 11 o'clock, we were just excited. They had 3 books for sale. One of them was Sam's book, The Holy Man and the Psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. And so we read...
By the way, we interviewed him.
He's a wonderful guy.
He's coming shortly.
They're very good friends of mine, Sam and Sharon. So I read the book, and right away I wanted to come to India. I felt so drawn and so much in love with this being that I wanted to know who he was, and was he really for real, and my experiences I was having on the inside.
Can I ask you a mischievous question? Do you know who he is right now? After
you
so many
know
years?
Something, he still mystifies me. He keeps me very mystified.
Well, you're not alone.
But I still love him dearly,
you're
dearly.
Not alone. Many people say, I don't have to know who he is. I know he is love. That's enough for me.
Yes.
Good.
We have to go on our experiences, I think, and each one of us have our own experiences, and that's what we have to go on.
That's good. Now, when you came here in 78, what was your first impression? Because, you heard something from an attorney, and that gave you a high, shall I say. And then you came here, you must have had some expectations.
Well, yes,
and
I had
Tirupati those days was not.
Yes, it was
quite
very difficult.
Oh,
it was the food was very hot, and I had a
the
tough
weather
time.
Was hot.
The weather was hot. It was June, and the weather was hot, and
it must have been very, very humid in June.
It was, and there were a lot of people here, and our conditions. There were 14 of us, I think, in this little flat that we stayed in, and everybody, got a little irritable at times, and I wasn't sure. I had a lot of doubts at that time, really. And I just wasn't sure that I was in the right place. I didn't know the food was bothering me. My husband didn't come with me. He and the children stayed home. He felt like that I had such a desire to come. And a good teacher friend of mine wanted to come.
But you weren't disappointed, were you?
No, because Swami was he called all the Westerners into the mandir and gave us a discourse. And then he came around and gave each one of us little packets of vibhuti. And I said to him, thank you. And that afternoon, I felt the need to write him a letter. And so I wrote him a letter. And those were the days when you'd line up and the first ones in the line got to first row. So I went early and and he came to me and got my letter. And he said, thank you to me. So my first words to him were thank you. And his to me was thank you.
He said thank you to you?
Yes, when I handed him the letter, he said thank you.
My God. Looking back, I suppose you must be one of the very few people to whom he has used the actual word thank you.
Yes, I don't know what that was about really, but when
I've been pulling your leg or something.
Oh, I'm sure. But
okay.
It made me very happy.
So how has it been afterwards?
Well, I've had growing pains and I've had some wonderful, wonderful experiences that I wouldn't trade anything for. They have just been... it's hard to explain, godly type experiences. I was being transformed. And I thought that I already was a person that had very little ego and a good person and all these things that I thought I was. And Swami had his way to bring up the things that weren't so pretty in me, that the dark side of me. And it was sort of disappointing when I began to experience that side of myself. But I was on the road of transformation, and that can be very painful. And so I went through some very painful type experiences in the act of becoming. But looking back, all of them were wonderful, wonderful experiences, and it's made me basically who I am today.
Is there any particular one that stands out in your memory which you would like to share with our listeners by any chance?
Well, I think my second trip in '79, I wanted to come. I was a school teacher, and so I couldn't come except when we had our school vacations.
School teacher in California?
In California, yes. And so I had to come in the summertime. And when everyone was coming, I had so many obstacles, and I could not come. And I had this desire to come so desperately. And later in the summer, when all my friends were coming home, I had a dream, and he said, come now. And so I came, and basically I was here alone. And one morning, sitting, that's when he lived in the mandir, and sitting under his bedroom window, I had this thought came to me, what if he isn't who he says he is? What if he is the Antichrist? And I didn't know where these thoughts were coming from, because I had been so happy and so thrilled at being here. But I got up and went back to my room and wept and wept. And then I went to darshan, but while I was in my room, I prayed very hard. I prayed very hard to this God that I had prayed to all my life, somewhere out in the space. And I decided that I should probably also pray to Jesus. And so I brought in Jesus into the act also. And when I went to darshan, my dream became true. The dream that I had where he said, come now, was happening right there in darshan. And I thought, oh my goodness, he's going to call me in. And sure enough, he did. And he said to me about all my bumps and jumps I was having, how my mind was going that morning. And then he said to me...
Did you find it very uncomfortable?
Well, yes and no. I was very uncomfortable in the fact that I had these thoughts that I didn't know where they were coming from.
But in the sense that he knew everything about you.
Oh, yes. There was a part of me that knew that on one level, but to experience it was another thing. So he said to me...
that's what people say. It's a different thing to know it in your head, and it's quite a different thing to experience it in your heart.
Exactly.
I did not realize the difference between the head and the heart till I came to Swami.
Yes.
There's an ocean of difference.
Absolutely.
I mention this particularly because, a lot of people come and say Swami is God. Those are words that are drawn out of the head.
Exactly.
Those who know it in the heart don't speak it.
Yes.
Their actions show it.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly.
you went through that discovery, I suppose.
Well, yes, I did. And he told me, he said, I hear all the prayers. I even hear the prayers to Jesus. And so I knew that he was telling me that he was with me that morning also. And then he made me candy. And my earthly father had a grocery store, and so he used to bring me candy when I was a child. And this was like my earthly father. I had been crying all morning, and he was like, you feel bad, and would you like some candy? And I said, yes, I would. And so he made some candy for me. And I was like a child. I was like a child at his feet, so captivated and so much in love. But this trip was I had to be here alone because he had to bring all this out of me. Mm-hmm. So he brought it up and served it to me on a silver platter, and I had to deal with it. And I was alone, and I dealt with it alone.
But you passed the exam. You got a candy.
I got candy.
Good.
It was a wonderful experience. It was part of becoming.
If I were to ask you what teaching of Swami you consider most important, what would you say? Because different people have different perceptions about this. You have come literally from Middle America and fundamental Christian background, and you have gone through all kinds of bumps and jumps,
yes,
as Swami
exactly.
puts it. At the end of it all, what is the lesson of Swami that you hold
I think
most important to
the
you?
most important lessons is that we are God. We are all God.
By the way, Swami thinks that is the most important from his point of view also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, again and again he says, the most important message that I have come to give is to remind you that you are God.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad you picked the right answer in this quiz context.
Well, Elsie Cowan was a very good friend of mine.
Uh-huh.
And she always said that, we're God, you're God, you're God, you're no different from God.
You didn't say my God.
No.
Okay.
So I'm God and you're God, and you have to see everyone. And God is love, and love and God are synonymous. And so to me, that's the richest and the best.
So how did you go about, if at all, telling other people that they are God? Having learned that you're God.
Well, I have this wonderful sister-in-law that's a good Southern Baptist, and so I said to her one day that we were all God, and she laughed.
She said, I'm a sinner. Did she?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. That, that's foolish to think that we are God. And so I think that it has to happen in its own time. We have to experience it maybe. And I don't know. I think that's very difficult too. But I think
the point is, I think this issue of God and not God is not explained properly. So Swami has explained it many times in different ways. For example, he says, you agree your body is made of food? Yes, Swami. Where did the food come from? Outside. Do you agree the outside is made of 5 elements? Yes, Swami. Do you agree that God created 5 elements? Yes, Swami. Do you agree the power of God are present in the 5 elements? Yes, Swami. Do you agree the 5 elements is God? Yes, Swami. If the 5 elements are in you, then why can't you say that God is in you? So straight away, like a lawyer, he traps you.
Right, exactly.
And then he says, do you feel love? Yes, Swami. Do you agree God is love? Yes, Swami. Then if you feel love is inside you, why don't you say God is in you? I think that's the real point. And he says that, you have this chimney lamp. In the old days, we used to have this with a wick and oil. You must.
I remember those days.
Yeah, you must.
I remember them. Yes.
I read for my school exam with one such lamp.
I did too.
So I'm sure you understand what I mean. And the smoke will make them get dirty. It's not the glass that is dirty per se. It's the smoke that makes it. In the same way, Swami says, if you turn your mind to the world, you get a cloud, but you can erase it. So really speaking, your core is good. It's just that the outside is dirty.
Exactly. It's
like, a fruit, you wash it off and then it becomes nice and good. So I think this is the point which takes a very long time to understand, because we are so brainwashed into believing we are no good.
But I was taught all my life in my Christian religion that God is omnipresent. Well, if God is omnipresent, what is that? He's everywhere at all times. Well, where are we? Are we somewhere separate from that?
Exactly. See, that logic doesn't seem to
we just don't think about that.
We don't think
exactly.
About it. But anyway, I'm glad that you have accepted this. Okay, now the question is, once you realize that you're God, did it make any difference to your life?
Well, yes, I think so. But you see, Maya, I have to remind myself many times because I still have periods of anger. I have periods of jealousy. I have those periods.
Those are, remnants of the past, shall I say?
Oh, I'm sure that's true.
But what I'm trying to say is there must be times when you look at someone else and have the feeling that is God. That's also God.
I've had wonderful experiences with children. In the classroom, incredible experiences. I taught the small children. And for
How old?
Several years I taught kindergarten.
Oh, they must be about 4 or 5?
5 years old, 5 and 6. And so I always had a quiet time. They always had to have 5 minutes of just quiet time. And
the children would be quiet?
They would. They were they did. Well, we started out with just 1 minute, and then we'd go to 2 minutes, and then, we ended up with 5. They wanted to do more. And I said, no, we'll stop at 5. We have work to do.
That's very nice. I never heard of such a thing before.
One particular day, this little boy on the back row, Jeremy, and Jeremy was such a sweet little disleveled, from a very dysfunctional family. And so he raised his hand, and he wanted to share with me what he had experienced that day in his quiet time. So finally I said, yes, Jeremy, what happened to you today? He said, I saw a teacher. I saw God. I said, oh, Jeremy, that's wonderful. Can you tell us what God looked like? He said, yes. And he put his hands over his head and he said he had a lot of black hair and a blue business suit. Well, I knew that he had seen God. These types of experiences happened to me. One day, walking in the park, a little 5-year-old came up to me on his bicycle, and he said, please go home with me. I want you to meet my parents. I told this in front of Swami in 1983. I was asked to speak at the valedictory, and so I told this story because it had just happened to me a few months before I came. And so this little fella kept asking me to go home with him. He wanted me to meet his parents, and I said,
did you know this boy?
No, I did not.
Came out of the blue?
No, he came out of the blue. I was on my afternoon walk. And so I said, I can't go home with you today, but I'll come this way tomorrow, and I'll promise you I'll go home with you tomorrow. And he just kept begging, please, oh, please. And finally, he was such a cute little mischievous kid. And so I said to him, say, do you know Baba? Just out of the blue. And I don't even know why I said that. He jumped off his little bicycle and he looked, he said, yes, I do. He's Jesus Christ and all his angels. He got back up on his little bicycle and rode off into the night. And I never saw him again. But these are the types of experiences I would have with children that for some moment, that moment in time, they knew. God has had wonderful fun with me through children. He speaks to me many times through these children. And so we just have to be awake and listen to that. And many other people speak to me, to us too.
Talking of children, I remember one conversation with Swami many years ago. He said, try to be like a child for 5 minutes every day. And then he talked about Jesus and his love for children and how Jesus said children are pure and all that. He said, if you are like a child for 5 minutes every day, that'll do you a lot of good. Basically, you go back to something like purity and innocence.
Exactly.
And talking of this silence, I am reminded of something that happened in Brazil. This was told to me by one of those people who is very active in EHV and all that. There was a teacher, and she had a boy in her class, 7 or 8 or 9, something like that. It was supposed to be a bit of a thug, shall I say, very indisciplined.
Many of them.
And she was having this silence class, and then this fellow, of course, didn't believe in silence. She went to him and said, whatever his name was, listen, people say you are a bad boy, but I tell you, you're not a bad boy. You're a very good boy. Others don't know it. You just close your eyes and think what a good boy you are. That's all the mantra she used. And you know what? This fellow closed his eyes, and at the end of it all, he began to feel he was a good boy. And very soon, he became a national celebrity, and this man who had come here, he showed me, see, he's all over internet, and his photo is here and all that. I showed it to my class. Just that one sentence, you're not a bad boy, really, you're a good boy.
Yes.
That made all the difference.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think it is good to discover that we are good at the core. There is a good bit of goodness in
Exactly.
Now, have you been connected with the organization in America?
Well, as I said, I was a school teacher, and so one of the first meetings I went to after we found out about Sai Baba, we didn't know of any meetings for 5 months. We just immersed ourselves in reading and just yearning to see
Where were you
him.
in California at that time?
I was in a place called Fountain Valley. We had our house in Fountain Valley, and we used that home for many years as a meeting place.
Is it in the north or south?
South. It's in Orange County, just like
Orange County.
yes. And they had just come in from being with Swami, and Swami had said, "Go back to America and start children's classes." Well, I knew that was my first meeting, and I knew that was going to be my role to play because I was an educator and I had 2 children, small children, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so I began to ask questions, and in '79 I did start one of the first children's classes in Southern California.
What did you tell the children, if I may ask?
Well, basically, I like music, and so we sang a lot of songs. God is love, and God's love is so wonderful, and all these wonderful things. And then we also began to learn bhajans because we didn't. I didn't know bhajans and that type of thing, and so we began to teach our children that. And basically, I think in the beginning, I taught them many of the Indian legends, the Hindu type stories and about Ganesha and those types of things.
How were they received?
Well, my children, they had been in Sunday school, and of course their teachings had been, all around Jesus, and I think they sort of liked the difference, but I had to be very careful of not coming on too strong.
That's true.
I had to be, but we had small classes. I only had 5 children in the beginning, and then 7, and, it kept growing, and so we grew together, really. I mean, we were
Did you keep track of these children when they grew big?
Well, 2 of them were my own. And so they have, my daughter has, to see her mature, she's a mother now, and see her apply these teachings into her own little family. And the others too, most of them are college graduates, and they're on their own. And they've turned out really quite well.
That's very nice, because many months ago when I was interviewing John Benner right here, he told me of a very interesting incident. He said he went to medical center and he was just pulling out of the parking lot, and a man in a white coat came running. Said, "Sir, stop." He said, "What's the matter?" This man said, "Do you remember me?" He said, "I'm sorry, I don't remember you." He said, "I used to come to your Bal Vikas classes." But the story doesn't end there. This boy was the son of a poor man. And at one stage, his father didn't have money. So he sold off the television set and so that he could get some money. And after some time, when he got the money, he asked the children, "Shall I buy the television set again?" They said, "No, it's going to be a disturbance to us. It interferes with our Bal Vikas classes and all that." And that the children told the teacher, and the man also told the teacher, and so on. That happened many years ago. And this young doctor said, "I am that fellow who didn't want a TV set."
Isn't that wonderful?
So it was kind of very nice to hear such a story. And that was the reason why I asked you to find out whether it made any impact, because many people are very skeptical. They say, "Oh, you can con children into believing anything," but when they grow up, peer pressure drives them away.
No, I think of this one little fellow that I had, and he was a precocious child, and he was quite active in the classroom, and his teacher had talked to his parents about, his behavior in the classroom. And by the end of the year, after he'd been into the Bal Vikas class for a year, the teacher said, "I don't know what you're doing, but whatever you're doing, keep it up, because I have seen such a wonderful growth in this child this year."
It's very interesting, because I've heard similar stories from UK and in Africa, but parents have written to the children, to the school, saying, "My child has improved."
True.
And it has happened in many places.
It's absolutely true.
And I'm basically convinced that human beings are decent and human at the core, and if only we would allow them to be that way,
Exactly.
They would shape up very well.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things that Swami is really asking us to do. Though not explicitly, but I think he's dropping big hints that that's what you have to do.
Well, the Catholic Church always said, you give me your child up to the age of 5 and I'll have them from now on. And I think Swami is telling us if we start with these children at the age of 6, if we can take these kids from the age of 6, we're going to make a big impact onto their lives.
Okay, what's stopping America from doing this?
Well,
I'm sorry if
no.
my question is a little intrusive, but, I always wonder, America is so powerful militarily and it's top where knowledge is concerned, worldly knowledge. But why doesn't it go back to its roots?
I'm the National Education Coordinator. I guess you're aware of that. And then I travel around the country, all of the states, most all the states, to do teacher trainings. And so I see the things that are happening, and it's very disturbing to me because many of the Western kids have dropped out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we have probably lost many of our children because we haven't kept it universal. And we must get back to being, because in America we're quite a diverse group, and basically our fundamental background is Judeo-Christian.
Naturally.
And so our classes do not reflect that at all. And so I think, in my observation, it seems to be the reason that we have lost many of the Western children is because we've lost this effect on them. And frankly, I don't know what we can do to make it happen where we can come back to this being universal.
I think that's very simple in my opinion. Whoever is doing the teaching ought to go to the basics. That's what Swami does. Because what are the basics? Basics starts off with love. And love in thought is truth. Love in action is righteousness. Love in feeling is non-violence. And that takes care of everything. So really speaking, if we are on the same wavelength as Swami, there should be no problem. If we try to create our own wavelength, then we create problems for ourselves and for others.
Well, a lot of it is
maybe I think we have to look at education from a basic point, rather than in terms of any particular this thing. I mentioned this because there is a very interesting story. Many people might not have heard of this. Swami often says, chant the name of God. Mm-hmm. So, and he says you can pick any name because all names are mine.
Right.
There was one man who didn't know what name to pick. So he decided to say all the time, Swami, I love you. Swami, I love you. That's all. Forget about the name. He kept on saying. Right. And he was rewarded with all the interviews you could ask for.
That's going to be my chant from now on.
Now, I mentioned this because there was a man from America who wrote to me, an American. He says, should I chant Sai Ram or Om Sai Ram or Om Sri Sai Ram? Which one would you pick? And then I wrote back to him, this is it. What does it tell you? And he said, I got it now. So really speaking, it is love that Swami is all the time interested in. And my experience has been, you can't get him to speak for 5 minutes without bringing the word love in at least once.
Exactly.
It comes in somewhere or the other. And I realized that is the primordial thing, nothing else.
Well, we have some wonderful classes in America. I mean, we have some wonderful things going on, big classes. We have some, that are 60, 70, 80 children, maybe even up to 100. And so they're doing some really good things. And so I think it's just a matter of changing a little bit, but not changing the basics. The stories and the values, practicing the values is the same in any culture, at any time. It's the same. Yes. Well, we have a lot of wonderful teachers, and they're doing a good job. And I'm, for the most part, I'm very happy with them. And in fact, Swami told Dr. Goldstein a few months back that he was very happy with the Bal Vikas teachers in America, that he had many good ones and that they were doing a good job. So I felt pleased about that, because I feel that very much, that we may be small but we're mighty. I feel that there are certainly changes being made in homes.
But there's the other question still, there are a lot of people who may not formally belong to the Sai Center or whatever it is, but they are not exempt from love.
Right.
They are not exempt from, the quest for truth and things like that. Do you feel there is any way to reach out to such people?
Well, I'm seeing the level of awareness being raised in all areas of our life. And I'm seeing it in the ministers in the Christian churches. Sometimes I watch them on television and I hear their messages. And many times they say things that Swami has said directly. And now whether they're reading some of Swami's things, teachings, it could very well be. But I'm seeing it. There is sort of a group consciousness, I think, that's taking place. And I'm seeing that.
That's precisely the reason why I asked you that question, because I have heard many interviews on radio with people from America, and I don't think they know anything about Swami.
Right,
and they have said similar things. Just to give an example, there was a boy, I suppose he's no longer a boy, he's a young man, who was very fat as a boy. And he used to be teased about it, and he felt very self-conscious. And then one day his brother told him, the only one who can help you is yourself. He took it very seriously and he reduced. And then he became convinced that he should remain slim and trim. And now it has become his life's mission to go around telling people, don't be fat. And in fact, he stunned me by naming 5 cities, and he said, these are the 5 fattest cities in America. I thought that was a new way of rating a city, fat city.
Right.
But he touched on the problem, but that's not the important thing. In between, he said one sentence which really stunned me. 2 sentences, in fact. He said, the body is the first gift that God gave me. And then he said, the body is the temple of God.
See.
Now, I told myself, how come this kid or young man said these things? He has never heard of Swami. Then I realized Swami is in him.
Exactly.
And you see, that is the reason why he spoke this. And I heard a BBC panel on Christian religion, and there was a lady who said, I feel there is a divinity out there, and I feel it's in me.
See.
She has never heard of Swami, but she spoke the right thing. Yes. Then I said, her heart is in the right place. That's not the end of the story. On that panel, there was a psychiatrist, and he said, I don't think I can succeed in my work unless it's based on love. I asked myself, has this fellow ever read Sandwich's book?
Exactly.
But I don't think he knows about Sandwich. No. So that convinced me that a good person has God in his heart, knowingly or unknowingly.
Exactly.
He articulates the right words. And there are a lot of these people who need to be somehow told about Swami so that they feel there is a rudder in their life. Otherwise, they're sort of drifting, they're probably groping. So my question now is, do you feel that all these people who are hungering for God can be made to become aware of love in real life, in the personality of Swami?
In the personality of Swami. I'm not sure what it is that makes one become aware of Swami. In the first meeting that my husband and I attended to the little church, it was at a little metaphysical church, and it was full. I would say there were probably close to 200 people there, maybe. And out of that group, now this fellow, Hal Stokes, was telling these beautiful stories about his experiences. And my husband and I were just captivated. We were immediately turned on to his message. But the majority of people there that evening didn't get it. So I think that it has to be the timing, or I'm not sure what it is.
Okay, let me put it like this. Instead of talking in abstract terms about Swami and his love, many people may say, I don't know about this person, I don't know what these people are talking about. Supposing we were to tell about the work that Swami is doing, of which there is a lot of evidence now, tangible work. in relation to what he's doing for the poor people, in relation to what he's doing for healthcare and supplying water and all these things. Do you think America would be receptive to that kind of thing?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I'm sure you're aware that just recently there was an article in the Times, New York Times, about Swami.
I met that fellow,
Did you?
Well, in the sense, on that day I was with the president. I was sort of asked to be with him for some time. That's because I know him very well. He was once my boss, incidentally.
Oh, is that right?
Yes. And Swami sent me all the way to Delhi to personally invite him. So I was there. He had just come there, and so I had to formally welcome him with a flower bouquet and all that. And we went upstairs, and then this New York Times man comes rushing upstairs, tall fellow, I had seen him a little earlier. I didn't know who he was. And then he was there with his notebook. Mr. President, you were with Sai Baba for such a long time. What did he tell you? And then he said something. He said, science must be blended with spiritualism, then only it's very useful and all that. So I was watching this fascinated, and afterwards I sort of made bold to ask him, may I know who you are? He said, I'm so-and-so, I'm from the New York Times. I said, my God, Swami is going to appear in New York Times.
And it was a good article. Not always favorable, but it was a good article.
I read it. So that was very nice. So I saw it happening, shall I say?
Yes.
Good. So how did people react to that article?
Well, I have a brother-in-law that's a scientist, and he's of course, he's known about Sai Baba ever since we have been into him, but he just can't be a believer. But this article, for some reason or other, really turned him around, and he was very much impressed. And it was because of the works that Swami is known for, the works he's doing. So I think there's a point here that when people, maybe they don't, in the beginning, they don't have to see him as an avatar or as God.
No. That is a particular aspect which is reserved for those who believe in incarnation.
Exactly.
But then the basic human qualities, of which is the ultimate paradigm, that is there for all to see.
Exactly. Well, he's certainly the exemplar, the big exemplar, because what he's doing, the governments couldn't do, and one has to take notice of that. I don't know how you could close your eyes to what is happening here, right here in southern India, in particular. And so I think that would be a big eye-opener.
Recently there was a very interesting incident on the 1st of this year, New Year's Day. Swami was to give a discourse, and he asked the Vice Chancellor and me to speak. First the Vice Chancellor spoke, then I spoke, and came and sat down. Normally, Swami starts on the discourse after that. And in fact, the person in charge of the sound arrangements brought Swami's mic. Swami waved it back. And I saw Mr. Chakravarti, the Secretary of the Central Trust, walking up there. No announcement had been made, and he had some big newspaper in his hand. He said, what's he doing here? With a big newspaper. And then we knew what was happening. One of the newspapers in Madras city, now called Chennai, a Tamil newspaper, had published a full-page article on the water project for Madras, about which even we here know very little. It had all kinds of photos. He read it out in Tamil and they did the translation. What it said was, whenever any politician does any work, even if it's very small, the billboards are huge. The work is small, the billboards are huge. And then all the other people try to get a lot of mileage out of it, even if they have nothing to do with it. But here was a man who was going to give water for more than 10 million people in the city of Madras. And they did not even go and ask him. He is giving it to them. And when we heard about it, we decided to go and find out what was happening. And there was not a single billboard. And there was no one to tell us what's going on and who is behind it. It took a lot of effort for us to find out what was going on. And the newspaper said, this is real service.
Yes.
Silently done.
Yes.
And, it made us feel so nice.
Absolutely.
Absolute, what you call, reticence, quietness. Just amazing.
Yes, and I think in time it will explode. I think, of course, Swami's the avatar. I fully believe that. And whatever he has come to do, it will be done.
Oh, yes, I think it will happen.
And so
I think in our own way, we must make people aware of these things because it has an impact. Just to give you an example, in El Salvador, there was an earthquake, you remember, 2 years ago. And our Sai devotees went to one small village populated by Indians. And they took them relief supplies, and then they asked them, do you want anything else? They said, can you give us water? These people are, what do you mean? They said, we have a water problem here. There is a small spring down there, and we have to go there and bring water up. We have to climb some 500 feet. And most of the day, the children are there bringing water, and nobody attends school. Can you do something? These people said, well, we'll think about it and get back to you. They got back in a little while. And they got cement, pipes, this and that, and they started digging trenches, putting a small pump house and so on. And the villagers couldn't believe it. Then they participated in all this, and they had a little function. And at the end of it all, they wrote a letter. I had the copy of that. I had that letter with me, not the copy. It is in Spanish. It's typed. And one man doesn't even sign. He puts his fingerprint there. And then there's another man who has signed it, and I got it translated into English. What they said is, for 20 years we have been begging the government, and they said it would cost us $1 million. You have come and done it for a very small amount, and you have made life so different for us, and now the children are going to school. I've got photos and all that. And we just thought you were bluffing, but we are so proud of you. May God bless you and all that. And they mentioned Swami and thanked him and all that. What I'm trying to say is the examples of Swami have gone all the way to the other end of the world and put life into a community and hope into a community.
Well, we all...
Through the kindness of the devotees there.
All of us that are supposedly devotees, we have a big obligation, I think, a duty. And Swami had said at one time, my life is my message. And then he said later, now, your life is my message. And so I think it's very important for all of us to do our duty, to get out and do what we can do.
I'm sure you'll agree. It's time we give Swami a bit of rest and make our lives his message.
Exactly.
Okay. So hoping that you would inspire others to take up the baton, shall I say, and give Swami a much-needed rest. Let him watch us and cheer us from the sidelines.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
So once I was saying that we should make the world so nice that Prema Sai, when he comes, should have no work.
Exactly.
Just forget it. We nice. It's nice to have you here, but we are sorry, there's no work for you. How about
just
that?
darshan.
How about that? Well, we should give our Swami that chance.
Absolutely.
And with that hope and prayer, I thank you for being with us and sharing your thoughts with our listeners.
Thank you for allowing me
and
to
come again.
Thank you so very much.
Sairam.